Imagine the most powerful man in England, ensconced in wealth and luxury, gasping in agony as his screams reverberate off cold stone walls. Imagine a death so grotesque and revolting that even his own physicians are repulsed and flee from his presence. This is not a work of fiction. This is the documented end of King John of England, a monarch whose cruelty was only matched by the horror of his final days. It is October 1216. Our king lies dying, not in battle, nor by assassination, nor with the dignity befitting a ruler. Instead, he succumbs to a grotesque fate, drowning in his own waste as his body literally tears itself apart from within. The stench is so overpowering that no number of candles can mask it. The pain is excruciating, with no morphine available to alleviate his suffering, a precursor to modern medicine lost on this desperate monarch. It all began with a sumptuous feast and a king too proud to acknowledge his own mortality. Today, we explore one of the most disturbing deaths recorded in royal history, part medical catastrophe, part divine judgment, and entirely horrifying. This is the story of King John, the tyrant who lost everything, including control of his own body. A warning, what you are about to hear is not for the faint of heart. Before we delve into the gruesome manner of his demise, it's crucial to understand the man himself. King John's death was not merely random. Rather, it was an appropriate conclusion to a reign marked by betrayal, cruelty, and excess. John ascended to the English throne in 1199 after the death of his brother, Richard the Lionheart. Right from the start, he was perceived with suspicion and disdain. As the youngest son of Henry II and Eleanor of Aquitaine, he was never expected to rule and was ill-prepared for the weight of a crown. His father even nicknamed him Lackland because, unlike his brothers, John had been given no lands to govern. When Richard died without legitimate heirs, John seized power through a cunning mix of political maneuvering and raw ambition. However, he inherited a kingdom already weakened by his brother's costly crusades and relentless wars. England needed a strong leader. What they got was John, a man whose paranoia and incompetence nearly brought the realm to ruin. Within just a few years of taking the throne, John had lost nearly all of England's territories in France. Normandy, Anjou, and other crucial holdings fell into the hands of King Philip II of France, earning John the ignominious nickname Softsword. These defeats were not just embarrassing. They represented substantial economic and strategic setbacks that weakened England's position in Europe. But John's failures abroad were dwarfed by the tyranny he imposed at home. He mercilessly taxed his nobles, often without legal justification. He seized lands based on flimsy excuses, imprisoned rivals without trial, and confiscated their estates. Allegations of his brutality swirled around him, including claims that he had ordered the murder of his nephew, Arthur of Brittany, who had a stronger claim to the throne. As his tyranny grew, the nobility became increasingly restless, and the common people suffered under his crushing taxes. The church excommunicated John after he refused to accept the Pope's choice for Archbishop of Canterbury. For 6 long years, England was under papal interdiction, no Christian services, no weddings, no proper burials. Yet John was unfazed. He simply seized church lands and revenues for himself. By 1215, the kingdom had reached a breaking point. The barons had grown weary of John's abuses and met him at Runnymede, forcing him to sign the Magna Carta, a document limiting royal power and establishing fundamental legal rights. It was a humiliation unlike any faced by an English monarch before. Though he signed it, he had no intention of honoring it. Just months later, John convinced Pope Innocent III to declare the Magna Carta invalid, claiming it had been signed under duress. This rebellious act ignited a civil war across England. In a desperate move, the rebels invited Prince Louis of France to invade and lay claim to the English throne. By 1216, much of eastern England lay under French control. John spent that year fighting a losing battle against his own nobles and a foreign invasion, marching his armies across the countryside, winning skirmishes, but never claiming a decisive victory. The stress of this relentless conflict weighed heavily on him. He slept poorly, ate irregularly, and ultimately drove himself to a state of physical and mental collapse. As October rolled in, his body began to betray him in the most unimaginable way. The first signs emerged as John's army marched through the eastern counties. Contemporary chronicles documented the king suffering from severe stomach pain and frequent bowel movements. Initially, it appeared to be a common illness, perhaps caused by contaminated food or water hazards, all too prevalent in medieval England. Yet this was far from ordinary. John had contracted dysentery, a bacterial infection causing severe inflammation in the intestines. In the 13th century, dysentery was common and often fatal, spreading through unsanitary conditions typical in military camps, where soldiers defecated near water sources, contaminating their environment. The symptoms were hellish sharp abdominal pains followed by urgent diarrhea that was neither typical nor benign. It came mixed with blood and mucus, accompanied by excruciating cramps as the already infected intestines convulsed violently, depleting the body of fluids and triggering dehydration and fever. Day by day, John felt weaker. Each bathroom visit was torture, a painful reminder that his body was turning against him. His physicians likely tried various remedies, relying on the limited medical knowledge of the time. They may have offered mixtures of wine and herbs, perhaps opiates for the pain, or binding agents to slow the diarrhea. But John refused to relent. He would not show weakness to his nobles or soldiers. A king fighting for his throne could not afford to appear frail or vulnerable. So he pressed on, marching and leading his forces even as his body began to crumble. Chronicler Roger of Wendover, writing shortly after John's death, described the king as increasingly haggard. His once vibrant face turned pale and eventually gray. He lost weight rapidly as his body failed to absorb nutrients. Everything he consumed passed through him almost immediately, leaving him starving despite his continued attempts to eat. By mid-October, John's health had significantly deteriorated. His dysentery had escalated from acute to severe, with his intestinal walls becoming inflamed and ulcerated. Every bowel movement must have been excruciatingly painful, with blood mixing with diarrhea, creating the bloody stool characteristic of the disease. Yet John persisted. He felt he had no choice. The French forces were advancing, and rebellious barons controlled much of England. If he showed weakness by retiring to bed, it would be seen as a sign of divine disfavor. On October 12, 1216, King John arrived at Bishop's Lynn Castle in Norfolk, utterly spent and weak from days of dysentery, struggling to stay on his horse. Any sensible person would have sought rest immediately, consuming only the blandest foods, if anything at all. But John was neither sensible nor reasonable. He was desperate, proud, and hell-bent on maintaining appearances. That evening, a feast was prepared. The menu details have been lost to history, but we can reconstruct it based on what was customary at royal banquets of the time. Roasted meats, venison, wild boar, perhaps swan or peacock, all drenched in rich gravies and heavily spiced sauces to disguise the taste of possibly less than fresh meat. Bread soaked in wine, cheeses, fruit pies laden with butter and sugar all, these would have been toxic to John's already diseased intestines. Fatty meats would sit like stones in his inflamed system, while spices would further irritate his already ulcerated walls. A competent physician would have forbidden such a feast. Yet John consumed meal after meal, described as eating with almost manic intensity, perhaps trying to prove his vitality through sheer consumption, or to convince himself and onlookers that he remained strong and in control. His courtiers watched with mounting unease. Some may have attempted to suggest he moderate his intake, but no one dared to tell a king, particularly a king like John, what he should eat. Engulfed in delusion, he gorged himself on the very foods that would seal his fate. Soon the meal hit his stomach like poison. His digestive system, already ravaged by dysentery, could not cope. Rather than breaking down the food, the stomach acids merely aggravated his inflamed tissues. As the food passed into his intestines, they, already too damaged to absorb nutrients, struggled valiantly but futilely. Within an hour the pain began. It started as the familiar cramping John had experienced for days, but quickly escalated. The cramps came in waves, each one more intense than the last. His face turned white, then gray, and beads of sweat streamed down his brow. He gripped the edge of the table to maintain his composure while his body agonized against him. Witnesses would later recount how he was helped from the feast hall. The proud king, who had entered upright and resolute, now required assistance from servants as he stumbled toward his chambers, his legs barely able to support him and breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The pain was unlike anything he had ever known. That night, John's condition deteriorated from severe to catastrophic. The dysentery that had been plaguing him suddenly accelerated, amplified by the overwhelming amount of food he had consumed. His intestinal walls, already thin and damaged, could bear no more pressure. The human intestine is a remarkable organ, approximately 20 feet long, coiled within the abdominal cavity and composed of multiple layers. In a healthy intestine, these layers function in harmony. However, in cases of severe dysentery, such as John's, these layers become compromised. Infection causes inflammation that weakens the tissue. Ulcers form, eroding through the protective mucosa. Blood vessels rupture, and the muscular layer loses its ability to contract properly. John's intestines had been under siege for days, possibly weeks. The bacterial infection had wrought extensive damage throughout his digestive system. The constant barrage of diarrhea had made nutrient absorption nearly impossible, leaving him malnourished and weak. When John feasted that night, he created the perfect storm. The sheer volume of the food began to distend his already compromised intestines, stretching their walls dangerously thin. The fats in the meat proved difficult to digest, forcing his intestines to contract more forcefully. The pressure built steadily until, in the early hours of October 13th, something finally ruptured. The exact location of the rupture remains unknown, but it most likely occurred in the colon or lower intestine, where the existing damage from dysentery would have been most profound. A section of the intestinal wall, weakened and stretched, tore open. The pain would have been instantaneous and unbearable. When an intestine perforates, its contents spill into the abdominal cavity. Partially digested food, bacteria, digestive enzymes, and fecal matter, transforming a sterile environment into a hazardous zone rife with pathogens. John would have experienced a sudden, stabbing pain unlike anything he had ever encountered. It was so intense that he likely screamed, a sound that echoed hauntingly through the stone corridors of the castle. The pain wouldn't be concentrated in a single spot. It would radiate throughout his entire abdomen as contaminated materials leaked into his body. Distressed servants rushed to his chambers to find a king gripped by excruciating agony, clutching his swollen belly and contorted in distress. The intensity of his pain rendered him unable to lie still. He writhed and thrashed, desperately searching for even temporary relief. But there was none. As the contents of his intestines spilled into the abdominal cavity, John's immune system reacted violently. This condition, known as peritonitis, involves an inflammation of the peritoneum, the membrane lining the abdominal cavity, and was almost always fatal. In the 13th century, bacteria from John's ruptured intestine, particularly E. coli and other fecal bacteria, began to multiply rapidly in the warmth of his abdominal cavity. His immune response swelled the area with white blood cells, fighting the infection but also increasing inflammation and discomfort. John's abdomen began to swell, not simply bloating. His belly distended as fluid accumulated in the cavity. This fluid, a mixture of digestive contents, pus from the immune response, and blood from damaged vessels, created a rigid, board-like abdomen taut to the touch. Every breath John took exasperated his pain, sending fresh waves of agony through his body. He couldn't eat or drink, barely managing to swallow. His physicians, likely attempting to provide some form of pain relief, probably resorted to opiate-based preparations, but nothing could touch the intensity of his suffering. As the infection ravaged his body, it began to infiltrate his bloodstream, leading to sepsis, a condition where the body's response to infection becomes uncontrolled, causing widespread damage across tissues and organs. John was trapped in a nightmarish cycle, a king whose reign was marked by tyranny now reduced to battling for survival against his own failing body. What began as a paranoid ruler's desperate grip on power culminated in a catastrophic end, a grim reminder of the cost of hubris and the folly of pride.